Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters, and welcome to this week's live chat. Every Thursday at 3 p.m., almost every Thursday, I get on here and I talk about something quilting related and I answer your questions live. So if you're watching live right now, be sure to leave your questions in the chat. Jessica is here monitoring that. She'll write them down and I'll answer them at the end. And I just got to tell you, I really look forward to hanging out with you for about a half an hour every week, chatting about quilting. So this live chat topic has been a long time coming. I get to finally talk about my new rulers, and they've been in the works for just about a year. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the process, like how they come about, how it works to create some rulers, show you what they're about, and then show you some quilting samples. Now, even if you aren't into machine quilting with rulers, these ideas or these ways that I'm using the rulers is something that you can apply to the ones you already have. Now, before we get into that though, every week on the live chat, I've started doing some giveaways, and last week's giveaway winner is Joanne Blanton. So Joanne, email us at jessica@quiltingismytherapy.com, your address, and we'll get that thread pack sent out to you. And this week's giveaway is for a pack of ruler circles. These are great for drawing out designs with your rulers and practicing how to create different designs without committing to actually quilting them. So it approximates the 1/4 inch in between the needle and the edge of your foot by using your pencil. So somebody will get that, and a pack of rainbow thread, because you know what? Ugh, I just love threads. If quilting is my therapy, then threads are my meds. Anyway, I digress. So again, I'm going to talk about my brand new rulers, which I just released a video last night, yesterday evening, about, and just kind of showed a really quick blurb about all three of them, and that's on my YouTube channel. So you can check that out if you want to see them in a little bit more kind of in action. I just have pictures I'll be sharing, but I did take some step-by-step photos of some of them so you can see kind of how some of these designs go together. Plus, I'll tell you how you can get the free downloadable PDF quilting diagrams and tips to use each ruler, and we'll just get in and have fun with it. So I'm looking forward to sharing my babies with you. So my new 3 rulers are Smiley, Dot, and Petunia. Now, I have released a couple sets of rulers with creative grids, and let me tell you, I love the final product and working with them. They all have the same black and white markings as my previous rulers, which are great for being able to see the reference lines no matter what color fabric you're working on. And they have the creative grids grip on the back that give you a little bit more control of your ruler. Now, how about the bad news? These rulers for right now are only available in high shank. So they're going to work on almost every long arm, I think every long arm, and high shank sewing machines. Working with creative grids, that is something that they take control of, and at this point, they have not expressed plans to have it in a low shank, but I will pass on any requests and we'll see if we can't get that to happen. Previous rulers that I have released have later on been released in low shank, so I'm not saying it's out of the picture, I'm just saying right now they are all high shank. That means they're 1/4 inch thick acrylic. And so on my YouTube channel, I have a video that shows you how to test if your machine is high shank or low shank, or check with your sewing machine manufacturer and see what they tell you, because every machine is different, even within brands. So you can't even say, is it a Janome? Because some Janome are low shank and some are high. Anyway, so let's talk about Petunia. Petunia is as pretty as a flower. She is going to help create floral shapes, arcs, and circles. Now, when I sit down and start thinking about creating or designing rulers, the very first thing I think about is, what are the designs that quilters struggle with, like newer quilters or even more experienced quilters? What are the designs that are really versatile to use in a lot of different ways? Or are there common frustrations that I can help alleviate with the rulers? I use these rulers and I want them to be versatile and useful. And so I'm kind of thinking about, well, you, like that person, what are they going to use them for? And Petunia is going to be great for creating those floral shapes and really giving you a lot of versatility out of it. Now, I'll show you some examples here in a second. But the one thing I want you to remember with Petunia as we go through is you're not always going to use the whole ruler. So when you're working with any of your machine quilting rulers, you don't have to use the whole thing. We're going to be rotating and using parts of it to create those floral shapes. Don't worry, I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. Now, Smiley, I have to admit, was designed for me. I struggle with quilting around the points of an arc. If you've ever worked with an arc ruler where you quilt around the point, I always get those rounded arcs. It's hard to reposition, and I was sitting there thinking, oh, if I had a needle stop we could just go from point to point, rotate, and quilt. And so this one is going to be great, and both sides create 2 different size arcs. So again, nice and versatile and used in a lot of different ways. So I'll show you what that looks like. And then lastly, Dot. This is a straight edge ruler that gives you a little bit more versatility. Using the reference lines, you can create straight lines at different angles, motifs, and as well as the cutout. I'm a sucker for fitting a cutout into a ruler wherever I can, just to give you, again, another side or a little bit more versatility to work with. So once I sit down and I think, okay, I kind of start brainstorming the different ideas, I kind of mock it up. Oh, I do. I mock up a really rough draft of it on my computer. So I use Illustrator. And this was Petunia. So I mocked up just kind of a rough outline, really rough, and approximate some different designs that you can make with it. And then I submit that to Creative Grids. They look it over and they kind of get back to me. They give me feedback or whatever. And for instance, this one, they were like, well, how is this different than Shelley? And so I kind of explained it a little bit, and because sometimes it's not obvious, and they're like, okay, once they decide that it's a go, they are gonna produce it. I take the time to make that nice final mock-up on my Illustrator, kind of approximating where I want those reference lines to be, kind of thinking the size. And when I'm doing it, I have that little square up there that shows, like the 1-inch reference guide, so they can have an idea of what this actual size is gonna be. Because I'm not just thinking about the design, I'm thinking about something that's gonna fit in your hands, something that's gonna be easy to use, and kind of work through that. Once that happens, I send it off to them and they give it to their person, I don't know who it is, and they cut it out of the plexiglass and they send me a mock-up. And so this is actually the ruler with just really faint reference lines in there. There's none of the markings, none of the grids, none of the dash reference lines. And I play with them for a little while, make sure that it does work, because it's one thing to see it on a computer, another thing to actually use it. And once I decide, yep, that is go time, it's good to go, then they do their magic and they mock it up and they add the reference lines and the dashes and the grid. And that's why I love being able to work with them. And here you can see there's Petunia, the final design that we went with. And while it's in production, then I spend my time coming up with the diagrams, coming up with the description, quilting the samples, and all that kind of stuff. This whole process doesn't usually take so long, but there was, I guess a plexiglass shortage or a acrylic shortage, and then paper problems. So it took a little bit longer to come out. We actually started this last spring, but finally it came out, and then now I can show you the samples that I worked with. So it's kind of fun to have that back and forth, a sounding board with Creative Grids, and again to have their patented Creative Grids grip on the back, and also not to handle the production myself, because that seems a little crazy. So I'm going to show you some quilted samples. This particular quilt you haven't seen yet, but it's going to be on the Midnight Quilter eventually. It's called True Blooms. It features Tula Pink's True Colors fabric, and it just so happened I got my prototypes right about the time I needed to quilt this quilt. So I thought, what a great way to practice some different designs with my rulers. Their kit is available for this on my website, but the actual video is not out yet. And so I had fun with this one, working with Petunia and the smiling and showing some different shapes. And so it's one thing to practice on a piece of fabric, but I love to use it on an actual quilt when I can, because it's going to help me kind of get used to working around and filling it in and working with some different stuff. So let's talk about Petunia and the designs that she can do. I hope you like the names. That's one of my favorite things about the rulers. I like to give them non-threatening, friendly names, because you can't be scared of a ruler that's called Petunia, right? And like I said, we're going to do some floral designs with this. Now, the first one I'm going to show you is when I combined the ruler with free motion, and this is something I love to do. Adding pops of your ruler design within other free motion designs just kind of lets you practice the shape without committing to it. And this is one of the areas that I quilted on that True Blooms quilt. So I'm quilting elongated swirls, and I wanted to throw in pops of circles and flower shapes and arcs in there. So to do this, to try this technique, you're going to quilt your design out into space and leave yourself enough room to actually put your design. And once you kind of get to that space, you're going to stop and then start quilting your ruler shape. It's going to look weird at first, but I promise it's going to all come together. So the inside of the Petunia ruler actually creates an arc or a circle, and I wanted to quilt this circle so that it looked like it was kind of laying on top of the swirls. So starting out with positioning my ruler using the reference lines, I'm going to quilt along that inner side and then reposition. So we're going to flip it around. It makes the same shape, obviously. I'm just going to rotate it and then do the same on the other side. And if you can see the dashed line, not where my foot is, but on the other side, not dashed, it's a solid line, right by that needle stop, I can use that to line up where my circle started. So the reference lines on here are going to really help you get that great looking design without taking your time to fuss and find where it is. Those reference lines are there for you. After I quilt my circle, or really any shape of any ruler that you have, then it's time to fill in the gaps. And this could be filled in with anything, any design that you're working on. The trick is to remember to use traveling to make it look like those lines are going behind your element. So since I wanted this circle to stand out, I'm going to travel along the edge of the circle and add my echo lines and my swirls and fill in that area. Now, if you have watched any of my live chats, you know I say that it's more important to fill in, make sure there's no gaps, than it is to be perfect. So I'm just adding echo lines, adding swirls, and quilting around that circle and filling it in and moving on. So the inside of that ruler Petunia makes a great circle or arc, and I had so much fun filling it in around those swirls. Just a little pop of fun every now and then. Again, if you're struggling with a new ruler or you just got one and you just want to try it a little bit without committing to using it over a whole area, that's going to be the way to go. Now, I also envision the outside of Petunia. Those little arcs can make flower shapes. They can make smaller circles. And I wanted it to be more like a floral meander, something that would fill up an area with a beautiful texture just by simply rotating it. So one thing I do when I'm starting getting the ruler ready to go, like I've already practiced a little bit, but now it's ready to take all the pictures, the quilted samples. I load a piece of fabric about a yard's worth, and I quilt as many different designs as I can think of, and then take pictures of the good ones to show you. So if you're struggling with your ruler, or you want to practice and try to use your imagination and come up with different designs, it's a great way to challenge yourself. How many ways can I move this ruler around? Now, I've already kind of mentioned it. I put together downloadable PDFs for each of the rulers, and those are free, and the link in the description box is where you'll find those. This is a great way for you to really be successful with the rulers, and this particular one, it takes that flower meander, which is in the PDF, and just adds a little bit of detail. So I just want to show you kind of how it comes together. I'm going to combine both sides of the ruler to create the shape, and it's so important when you're working with your rulers to make them as versatile as you can. Try using both sides if you have a double-sided ruler. Try combining different rulers. You'll be amazed by the variations you can come out with. So I'm starting with my half circle along that edge, and then I'm going to start adding my petals or my arcs around my circle. Now, the thing with Petunia is we don't always want that perfect half shape, right? We want to be able to wrap it around an element. So rotating it around is going to be the trick. So first you can see how my ruler's positioned. I have my first arc. And then when I go to add my next one, I'm kind of shifting it a little bit and then keep rotating it around and moving till I get to the edge of my area. Now, what's nice about this is I can use the reference lines or the actual edge of the ruler as a guide, because I know that I have about 1/4 of an inch in between the needle and the edge of my foot. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it, rotating it, and adding my first layer of petals around the flower. Once I get that first one done, and you can see here the ruler doesn't line up with all those petals because I'm rotating it as I go. Sometimes I can get 2 petals, sometimes just 1, but rotating it just nice and shifting it around. It's time to add my next layer, which I'm going to shift it again and keep adding them. Just like any flower meander, I'm not worried about the petals touching the previously quilted row. I'm just trying to get it close and add my petals. I'm going with this all over texture. I want this beautiful kind of look, and so I'm adding my kind of rows outside of here. And again, you can see I've worked my way till I ran out of room and repeat, right? Just kind of rotating it, eyeballing where the line's going to be, quilting along the edge until I, again, fill my area. Now, this particular one, I started on the edge, but if I wanted to start it in the middle of anywhere, I would just do a circle and then add it around the outside. Here, I'm quilting in a section. So now I'm adding my next one. Again, just showing you that rotating the ruler is going to help me keep those curves nice and close to the design, right? I don't want any gaps. And you can stop whenever you want, right? Since I'm rotating the ruler and I'm moving it around, I can make my flower as big as I want or add as many of those lines as I want. But at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm ready to move on and quilt my next flower. So I have this beautiful texture, those nice arcs. It just makes me so happy. So to add another flower, if you've ever quilted a flower meander or watched my video on it, I talk about you quilt the shape and then you add a partial row and then you kind of branch off of it. And that's what I'm doing here. Quilted my shape. I've added 3 extra petals just to get me out of that corner. And now I'm ready to branch off and add my next one. So I'm going to do that by quilting my arcs. Except here, I didn't want a whole big circle just because I didn't want to leave a big unquilted area. I wanted it to all be fairly consistent. It doesn't matter. You can do it however you want. But I decided I wanted kind of like a pointy kind of arc. So I'm going to quilt along the inner curve for about partial way, like 3/4 of the way to one of those reference lines. And I'm going to stop. So again, I'm not always using the whole ruler. I am using just part of it sometimes to create different shapes. And then I'm going to reposition the ruler, come back to my starting point, and that's going to give me that kind of pointy arc here. So again, if you can get comfortable with whipping it around like a ruler ninja, you're going to create some beautiful designs on there. And instead of having a bigger circle, I just have a pointier kind of shape to add my petals around. And just like I did before, I'm going to rotate the ruler, adding my petals around that shape and building off of it. And just like any design, if I end up with any gaps in between my flowers, I can add some more petals. I can move my ruler out of the way and just freehand in between. I just want to make sure the whole thing is filled in as much as possible. And if I find myself in an area I don't want to be, I can just add more arcs to get around to the place I want to get to. And I can keep branching off, filling in that area, creating that beautiful flower shape. So that kind of shows you the idea of branching off and adding more. And you can see here what they look like when they're all together. I promise if you're filling in a whole area, the first couple flowers might take a little bit longer, but once you get the trick of it, it goes by pretty fast. It's a lot of fun. Now on the True Blooms quilt, for part of it, I quilted the flower meander. Now the one I just showed you had that little like arc in the center, but you can just use the petals. You don't have to add that little bit. And so I had fun just doing the petals. Or you can, in the yellowish block, the yellow flower, I use just part of the petunia to create some pretty flower shapes in those block areas, traveling along the edge and then adding my next ones. Again, just a lot of fun to come up with some different designs. Now, when any ruler that you use, a really easy way to create a versatile design is to stack the design on top of each other. So I quilted rows and stacked them on top. And the way that the ruler is, when you quilt along it and reposition, you get this cute little overlap in between them. And so you get that little, just that little tiny oval shape. And this one is in the quilting diagrams. Really fun and fast to create just that kind of stacked floral look, or it could look like clouds if that's what you're going for. A lot of fun. And like I said before, combining both sides is really a great way to get the most out of your ruler. So adding the circle and then putting some petals around the outside, lots and lots of fun. And then this is just a close-up of the design technique that I used on the quilt. Just using a couple of the arcs, rotating it, filling that area in, gives me that nice, just all over texture. It's gonna look great on your quilts and look really pretty. But if you want to take it to the next level, you can use those little arcs and rotate or stack them or create circles or clamshells, little bitty clamshells, a lot of fun designs with those, especially like the little bubbles in a row or adding the echo lines or even that little basket weave on the bottom left. So again, all these designs are with the same ruler, just having fun thinking about how can I combine them, how can I rotate it, how can I move it around to create those different designs. All right, like I said, I do have those downloadable PDFs. Even if you're not thinking about getting the rulers, go ahead and download those and just see how I'm using it to create those shapes because you can apply those to your other rulers. I can't stress that enough. Make your rulers work for you. Make them nice and versatile so you can use them in a lot of different ways. Then you feel like, you've got your money's worth out of them. Now for Dot is kind of inspired by dot-to-dot quilting. So I love the geometric look of dot-to-dot quilting where we use reference lines and diagonal lines to create a geometric shape without marking. And I wanted to be able to use those different angles quickly and easily without having to do a lot of rotating of my ruler. And I wanted to include a cutout because who doesn't love an extra cutout on there? So let's see what you can do with Dot to create some fun designs. This particular one is actually really fun. I didn't take any in-progress pictures, but basically I'm quilting one shape and I'm flipping it over and continuing it on. So it's kind of like up and down. And the overlap that it naturally creates is this really cool geometric design that would look great in a huge border, in a big block, or even as an edge to edge, because as you kind of put them next to each other, they create secondary designs. So take your ruler and try flipping it around and using it in different directions and then hooking them together. But the inside of the ruler, creates this curvy, pointy shape, but even though it has curves on the side, you can just use the chevron part. And so in the video that I released yesterday, I'm just using the points to create that chevron shape quickly and easily. And since it's a cutout, I can just go from needle stop to needle stop, reposition really fast. So for my smaller borders, or I can stack them on top of each other for bigger borders. One of the funnest things, one of my most surprising designs that came out of this was this geometric all over, and you can kind of see it on the top and to the side. It was really fun to kind of think about how can I create shapes and connect them. This one isn't in the PDF, so I'm going to make a secondary one here in a couple weeks that goes with it because it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. But it's really cool that you don't have to use the outside to create those angles. You can use the inside as well. Or how about this design? Overlapping your shape is a great way to take a bigger shape and make it more densely quilted, especially if you love quilting things to death like I do. This is the same shape, just repeated on top of each other. Now, I actually did take in progress pictures of this, so you can kind of see it come together. But I also want to point out a different aspect of this ruler. One of the things when you have points on your ruler, if you go around the point, you're going to get a rounded edge, which is fine. But if you want that nice sharp point, you have to do some repositioning of the ruler. The good thing is with these angles, it's so quick. So I'm quilting along the edge of my dot ruler. If you look at the reference lines on the bottom, they're aligned with my fake seam. And I'm quilting all the way up to the point, but I'm not going to go around it because I want that nice sharp point. So once I get to that point, I'm going to shift the ruler down and over just underneath it and then continue on. So I'm just kind of taking it and putting it where I get that nice sharp point. If you went around the outside of it, it's fine. In my rulers challenge, if you watch the pointy rulers video, I talk a lot about how to get that nice sharp point. But now it's in position and I can quilt along the top of it to that point, and then I'm going to reposition. So I wanted to include a needle stop on here. I could have just had dot ended at point, but remember, I don't like going around points as much as possible. So that needle stop is going to make it really easy to stop, shift it to the other side, put my needle stop on the other side, and then repeat on the other side of my ruler. So going down and then continuing on. So again, using that straight edge, but since I'm able to kind of use the angles that are already there, I'm just easily just shift it over a little bit and continue on. And using that shape over and over again is what creates the effect that you see there. So once I get done with the first one, I just shift my ruler back to where I started and start the next. So it's really fun. Those are the things that I can't always approximate on a computer. That's why I like to quilt with them and see the designs I can come up with. Here's a closer look of that geometric kind of shape using the little chevron inside of dot. Now, of course, you can do this with a regular straight edge ruler. We're just talking about a lot of repositioning. Here, since I can just keep the ruler in one place, get two lines out of it, I can quilt it that much quicker. And I'm all about the efficient quilting. Here's some other examples, just again, layering on top of each other, flipping them around, trying some different angles, having fun with the ruler, and just again, trying to challenge myself, how many different ways can I quilt on this? Are they all going to be perfect for a quilt? No, but sometimes you're pleasantly surprised and you think, and then you have a sampler that you can look at later and think, I quilted that, and use it for design inspiration. Now, motifs are a great way to take any ruler and create shapes. You're just going to take that shape and rotate it around a center point or any point. And with dot, you can rotate that cutout shape and create some really fun motifs. So again, quilting along the cutout, rotating and continuing on. Now, this is in the handout. And in the handout, the downloadable PDF, I kind of show when I'm quilting motifs, I like to quilt my crosshairs, my vertical and horizontal, and then add in the diagonals to kind of split the difference to make it look better. Sometimes if I start this one point and rotate around, it doesn't always look right. So I like to kind of split the difference in between. But you'll see that in the PDF if you want to download it. And when I'm thinking about using my rulers, I'm thinking about how I would actually use it on a quilt. Borders, all overs, design, different widths of designs, right? Like if I want it for a border, I don't always just have 2-inch borders on my quilt. I maybe have borders of different widths. So again, playing with different configurations. This one is actually one of my favorite too. It's like a little pennant. And I was playing around with using the different sides, and it comes together really fast. So I just thought I would show you again, using the needle stop and the reference lines, I'm quilting along one edge and then repositioning it using that needle stop to just quickly switch it to the other side and coming down. So I'm basically quilting the sides of a box. And then I'm going to add a little chevron using the cutout. So again, even though you can use that whole cutout, there's kind of built-in little needle stops that I can quickly quilt inside that little chevron and then repeat. And it gives me that cute little pennant. So if you have a quilt that looks great on, perfect. And just like the other rulers, you know, I have the downloadable PDF so you can check out, again, the motifs and the different ways to use the ruler so you can be successful with it. And lastly, I'll land this plane. I know it's like I'm talking about my kids, right? I'm showing you how cute all my children are. Look at my kids, they're so adorable. I actually had to like kind of limit myself on pictures, if you can believe that, because there's a lot of pictures, but it's a lot of fun. So anyway, Smiley, again, allows you to create really quick arc shapes. So I'm not really coming up with new design ideas, but I am trying to take a shape that I love to quilt and making it a little bit easier and quicker. So once I came up with the idea of using the two sides of the arcs, I thought, how can I use arc shapes to create some different unexpected designs? So if you get the PDF for this, you can see how I'm using the arcs. So if you have a differently shaped one or different sized one, you can use that to your advantage. And again, I got the PDF that will break it down step by step for you. One of the unexpected things with the arc ruler that I came up with as I was quilting, if you look at that orange flower all the way to the right, you can see about right underneath the flower a little leaf on the side. That's the inner, the smaller arc. Perfect shape for a cute little leaf. Or if you look inside the flower block, those echoed arcs, just kind of filling in those blocks. So some different ways to use your arcs or your circle rulers. So just to kind of give you a visual of how it works, I know it's hard to understand just by looking at the ruler. First of all, we can see why I named it Smiley, right? Because it's like a smile. It makes you so happy. Plus, I was really happy when I thought, man, this is going to be a lot easier when I'm quilting arcs. So basically, I'm just going to go from needle stop to needle stop. Quilt along one edge, you can see the upper right, but then I'm going to rotate the ruler and flip it around so I can create the same shape on the other direction. But the reference lines are going to be there to help you out because you can put that reference line along the previously quilted line, make sure that it's good, and then continue on. So really nice and quick, and you get those sharp, sharp points that sometimes I struggle with when I'm using regular arc-shaped rulers. Now, like I said, it comes with two size arcs, a smaller one and a slightly larger one. That way you can use it in bigger and smaller blocks, and you can combine them with each other to create apple peel shapes or different type of designs. This particular one in the handouts, I show how you can create a motif by rotating it, kind of fun. And then you can see the two of them stacked inside of each other. So again, two different shapes. I wanted it, again, to be versatile and lots of fun. Now, just because you paid for the whole ruler doesn't mean you have to use the whole ruler, correct? And so here I'm just doing half arcs and creating a border design. So it's looking similar to Dot in this aspect, but as you're quilting with your rulers, think about using parts of it, of course, flipping it over, overlapping them to create those different shapes. Then you can play around with flipping it around. So you'll have to check out the PDF to see how this happens, but basically I quilt one arc one direction, flip it over and quilt the smaller arc the other direction. So I have this longer kind of swoosh shape, and then I just repeat it on the opposite side, but I shift it over. Again, you'll have to check out the PDF. It's pretty cool on how this comes together, and I quilted a whole big section of this. I left that quilted sample at home, so these are some pictures from a smaller sample that I had. But it's a really cool edge-to-edge shape that can fill your area quickly, or if you want to break up that negative space into smaller areas. This particular one I was super excited about. Now, when you're looking at your arc shapes, try using them for all over designs, which is not normally the first thing you think of when you think of arc rulers. But using the reference lines will make it easy to keep them in a row, keep them in a line, and help you fill in those areas nice and quickly. And so I show you how you can make some cables, very easy to do once you see how that comes together, some leafy shapes, but also motifs and border designs, just like we've already kind of seen. By this point, you're probably getting the idea on how we're going to break them apart and use these different designs. So just like motifs, like we saw before, we're rotating it around a center point. This one is going to be not quite as easy because I'm going to start a new line of quilting for each one. But if I had a particular area of the quilt center or somewhere I really wanted to show off the center part of that block, this is going to be a great way to do it. I kind of channeled my inner, I don't know, what's that thing where you would do your spin and spirograph thing. And then again, you can quilt your row of arcs to create some cables for bigger borders, more traditional look. Really, really fun. And that is in the PDF, so you can check that out. And here's where you can see it come together. So again, have fun repositioning, rotating. I did a whole live chat about how you can use your rulers in different ways, but it's a lot of fun to see just how versatile you can make it. Now, this is kind of how the cable comes together, but in this instance, I used to both sides instead of keeping each of those sections the same. This is going to be really helpful if you're trying to fit that cable into a defined area. If you need to make it a little bit smaller, you can, or a little bit bigger, you can adjust the curves that you have in there. But all I'm doing is creating my shape and then just traveling down or starting a new line and overlapping it. And the great thing about overlapping your lines is if the first line doesn't look great, just overlap it and keep going until you have a beautiful design. It really is the trick. So combining both of them to create a leafy shape, kind of fun. Arcs use, again, the reference lines will show you how to do this, the PDF, lots and lots of fun. So, all right, that's enough of watching how beautiful my kids are, right? We're like, oh my gosh, she's going on and on about it. But the idea is it's a lot of fun to create designs with your rulers and try to think about different ways to use them than you normally would. So do we have any questions with that, Jex? Lots of questions, your little hands writing away. I know that when it comes to rulers, there's a lot of questions, so be sure to check out my free motion challenge Quilting Along. It's a video series. I did a whole thing on rulers, different kinds of rulers, and one whole section was dedicated to arcs. And in that ruler, or that video, I show you how to, make them bigger or smaller, and talked about cutouts as well, so a lot of good videos that will help. How big is a circle inside Petunia? Once I started, I realized I should have wrote that down. I'm almost positive the bigger circle is 1.5 inches, and if you make a circle out of the little outer side, that's 1 inch. And so if you have the Shelly ruler, the Shelly makes a 3-inch circle. So they fit together really nice if you want to combine those two. When I use a rounded ruler, something moves, fabric ruler. So when I come back to the beginning, they don't match. Suggestions to keep things from shifting. This is the #1 frustration with using rulers. And it's just going to come with practice, honestly. But the one thing I could tell you is as you're working your way around the ruler, move your fingers, right? So if let's see if we can show this. As I'm quilting along, I'm going to move my hand as I work my way along that. That's going to help ensure that I have control. And also, secondly, don't be afraid to stop and reposition. I think sometimes we think we have to quilt that whole thing without stopping. You can stop at any point, reposition, see how things are going, because if it's not going to line up, you can kind of fudge it a little bit and get it on there. I will tell you, it's even happens with me, like when I'm trying to quilt a repeating design, sometimes it doesn't end where I need it to. I'll just extend it a little bit or shorten it a little bit. And I know it's hard to make sense, but if you watch that free motion challenge, Quilting Along the Arc section, you'll see that in action. How do I make it a little bit longer, a little bit shorter? And so don't be afraid to tweak it a bit. The reference lines will help you out. So like if I know that the line needs to end the middle of this needle stop, if I have to kind of rotate it a bit to get it to that point, even if it's not a perfect curve, it's going to be fine. It's going to look better that way. So hopefully those suggestions help. I know it's not super great. How would I use the ruler to add more space between the lines to make the designs bigger? I would add like my echoes or my secondary designs, I would just make them more spread out. Or like this particular one where I was quilting, showing you the steps to make that overlapped design. I was quilting around it and then repositioning. If I want more space, when I get done with the design, I can travel along the edge 1 inch or 2 and then quilt my next one. It won't overlap as much and it will make it less dense. So I'm going to use traveling in between the designs and play around with the spacing to create that. That's going to really help you out. Or if you have a ruler like this or Smiley, I know that this is smaller than this. So I'm going to use the bigger part of the ruler to create my designs. Hopefully that helps, but that's a quick, easy answer for that one. Do I have detailed instructions for Elvira? Yeah, so going back in the past, Elvira is one of my wavy rulers. She's nice and curvy, and I do have downloadable PDFs for that. I think it's in the product listing. If it's not, I'll get it added on there. I have so many PDFs for all the rulers. I think it's probably about time to make a dedicated page for them, and so I will work on that. Would it be possible to do a Baptist fan design using Smiley with any of your other rulers, with any, to supplement? I bet you can, but it's going to be tricky because a Baptist fan is kind of a quarter circle, and this isn't so much of a quarter circle. So you'd have to do some repositioning and coming down. I think it could happen, but it might be a little tricky. I'll have to play with that. I've not figured that out yet, so I'll have to mess with that. But I don't think I don't think any of my other rulers would create that shape, unless you use Shelly because it's a 3-inch circle and shifted it down. But that's gonna be a small Baptist fan, and nobody wants to do that. So I don't know. The answer is probably no, but I'll have to think on that and get back with you on that. So So very, very good questions. All right, again, if you want to check out the PDFs or to learn more about the rulers, you can check the link in the description box below. If you want to enter the giveaway for the thread or the drawing circles, just leave a comment after this live is done, and I will pick a winner next week. Now, next week's going to be a little different. Next week, we are hosting a Handy Quilter long arm event here, and so I'm going to do kind of a behind the scenes live chat, like here's the room, here's where I am, here's where I'm teaching. Not so much as, you know, sitting down focused like this. So you'll be on the fly with me. And then in the next couple weeks after that, I'm hoping to launch or tell you all about the next Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. So busy month in May, but lots and lots of fun. So I hope that everybody does well. I hope that all of you moms out there, or those of you that want to be moms, have a very happy Mother's Day and that you get lots of quilting time. And I will see you all next Thursday. And until then, everybody, happy quilting.